Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today, we're getting into a casting decision that's really got people talking, especially Harry Potter fans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the confirmation that Papa Esidu, who's a black actor, has been cast as Severus Snape in the new TV series.
Right, okay. Snape. That's definitely a big one. So for this deep dive, you've pointed me towards commentary from two YouTube channels.
That's right. We've got Clownfish TV and another creator, Kaida, who also goes by Kill.
Gotcha. And they've got some, let's say, distinct takes on this casting.
They certainly do. And our mission here, just to be clear for everyone listening, is really to unpack their arguments. We want to understand the different reactions, what's driving them,
But without throwing our own hats in the ring, opinion-wise,
Yes.
Analyze what they're saying.
Exactly. Just lay out the viewpoints. So let's kick things off with Clownfish TV. What was their immediate reaction?
Well, their starting point, basically, was this whole idea of a faithful adaptation. They seemed genuinely surprised.
Surprise.
Because the production team has apparently been emphasizing how true to the books they want to be.
Okay.
So for them, casting a black actor as Snape, who, let's face it, is described pretty clearly in the books as, well, not black, specifically pale.
Right. Sallow, pale, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It felt like a major contradiction right from the start. Like, hang on, how does this fit with faithful?
Okay, so that makes sense in terms of their initial surprise, this idea of faithfulness. It's always tricky, isn't it? What counts as essential?
It really is. And they didn't stop there. They moved on to Snape's backstory, which is, pretty crucial.
Hugely important to his whole arc, yeah. What were their concerns there?
This is where things got quite intense. They brought up the bullying Snape suffered from James Potter, Harry's dad.
Marauders, yeah. Rough stuff.
Right. And they specifically highlighted that scene where James and Sirius hang Snape upside down from a tree.
I remember that scene.
Well, Clownfish TV drew a direct line from that image to the historical horror of lynching black men.
Wow. Okay. That's a heavy...
It is. They argued that portraying that scene with a black Snape could create this incredibly uncomfortable, potentially traumatic resonance, even if unintended.
Yeah, you can see how that visual could land very differently. That's a really stark point they're making about visual interpretation and historical context.
Definitely. And they also touched on another aspect, Snape being the professor of the dark arts.
What was the issue there?
Again, it was about the optics. They seemed worried about sort of unfortunate stereotypes potentially being reinforced by having a black actor in that specific role.
Even unintentionally.
Yeah, just the visual shorthand, how audiences might read into it. And this kind of fed into their broader argument about what they called lazy race swapping.
Right, I saw that. And they mentioned Teen Vogue, interestingly enough.
Yeah, they quoted Teen Vogue, calling it a very progressive publication. Apparently also thought the Snape casting was a huge mistake.
So what's the core of that lazy argument?
Basically, that if a character's race is so clearly described in the book, just changing it feels, well, uninspired or unnecessary.
Like taking the easy way out for diversity points, maybe?
Kind of. They brought up that analogy, a non-white Snow White. The idea being some traits are just so baked into the established image of the character.
That Snow White example really spells out their view, doesn't it? Yeah. Like, where's the line between adaptation and just changing fundamental identifiers?
Exactly. And it leads to another concern they had, which shifts focus a bit from the character to the actor himself, Papa Esidu.
What was that?
They expressed, genuine worry about the actor facing hateful fan behavior.
Oh, right. The inevitable online backlash.
Yeah. They referenced past stuff, Star Wars, Doctor Who, where actors, especially actors of color, got slammed with abuse over casting.
That's such a depressing but unfortunately real part of modern fandom, isn't it?
It really is. And interestingly, Clownfish TV also kind of acknowledged that the Harry Potter books already deal with prejudice.
Yeah, the whole blood purity thing, mudblugs, it's central.
Right. So their question was sort of like, if those themes are already so strong, why add this other layer of race specifically by changing Snape's established appearance?
So they felt the story already had the tools to explore prejudice without this particular...
That seemed to be the implication, like maybe work within the existing framework.
Yeah.
Then they made a claim about the general online reaction they were seeing.
Oh, what did they say?
They claimed that, looking across social media, forums, whatever, the majority view they perceived was that this casting was stupid.
Stupid. Strong word.
Yeah, and that it felt maybe intentional because Snape is described so clearly.
Of course, gauging majority opinion online.
Absolutely. But it shows the strength of feeling in the circles they're observing it. They also talked about how it might change how we see Snape's history.
How so?
We're back to the James Potter bullying. They suggested making Snape black might make James look even worse, considering the historical context we talked about earlier.
So it reframes that whole dynamic potentially, adds another layer, maybe an unintended one.
Exactly. It's about those ripple effects.
No.
And finally, they brought in one more angle, citing an op-ed.
Which was about?
The potential cost of representation.
The cost, meaning?
Meaning the argument was that the potential harm to the actor, given Snape's, let's be honest, often nasty personality and the likely fan reaction, might not be worth the benefit of this specific casting choice.
Wow. So weighing the goal of representation against the potential negative impact on the individual actor, that adds a whole other ethical layer.
It really does. It asks us to think about the human costs sometimes involved. Okay, so that's a pretty detailed look at Clownfish TV's perspective. Shall we switch gears to Kaida?
Yeah, let's do that. Now, Kaida's take, I gather it was pretty strong from the outset.
Yeah, you could say that. The video apparently opens with a skit using racial slurs.
Seriously? What?
Yeah, seemingly to mock the whole idea of a black character in a certain context. So it sets a very clear, very negative tone right away.
Okay, so definitely not holding back. Leaves no doubt where they stand. What were the main reasons behind that strong disapproval?
Well, Kaida flat out argues there's no reason for this casting, full stop.
No reason at all.
Their point seems to be that other casting choices announced for the show look spot on, really accurate to the book descriptions.
So the argument is they can cast accurately when they want to, which makes this Snape choice feel deliberate.
Exactly. Like an intentional deviation. And they actually suggest a reason for that deviation.
Which is?
This is pretty provocative, but Kaida suggests Hollywood, or HBO specifically, is doing this to teach the audience a lesson.
Teach them? About what?
About the audience's own supposed bigotry and racism.
Whoa. Okay, that's a hefty accusation. Basically saying the casting is meant to be confrontational or instructive.
That's the vibe, yeah. And like Clownfish TV, Kaida also digs into how Snape's backstory lands differently with a black actor.
What aspects did they focus on?
They mentioned him being bullied, being poor, and significantly his whole lifelong pining after Lily Potter, a white woman.
Right, the unrequited love angle.
Yeah. Kaida questions how those specific dynamics, the poor bullied guy obsessed with a white girl, might be perceived or maybe misinterpreted through a racial lens. Again, raising concerns about optics.
So, similar territory to Clownfish on the backstory concerns, but maybe framed a bit differently, more about those specific relationship dynamics.
Seems like it. Kaida also brought up something interesting about labeling.
Labeling.
They argued that Papa Esidu will just end up being called Black Snape.
As opposed to just Snape.
Exactly. They feel it reduces the character and the actor to his race in comparison to the original. They contrasted it with established black characters like Blade or Storm. They're just Blade and Storm, right? Not Black Blade.
I see the point, that the qualifier itself feels diminishing.
Kaida called it degrading and a waste of Esidu's talent, basically.
Okay. Did Kaida offer any alternatives? If not this, then what?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They suggested, why not cast a great black actor like Esidu as someone like Kingsley Shacklebolt, maybe give him a bigger role. Or, even better in their view, create entirely new black characters within the Potter world. They brought up Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead.
The hugely popular character who wasn't in the comics.
Exactly. An example of putting in the work, as they put it, to create meaningful, original representation that audiences embrace.
So the argument is, create, don't just alter.
Pretty much. Kaida was very critical of what they see as superficial representation.
Meaning?
Accusing Hollywood of using black actors almost like a shield.
A shield?
Yeah, like ticking a diversity box without actually creating genuinely diverse stories or original characters from the ground up.
That's a critique you hear sometimes, isn't it? That race-swapping existing characters is easier than investing in new, diverse narratives.
It is. And given these strong views, Kaida wasn't optimistic about the reaction.
Let me guess, predicted backlash.
Major backlash, yeah. And specifically mentioned expecting racist jokes to proliferate because of this.
And who did they blame for that potential outcome?
They put the blame squarely on HBO for, in their view, creating the situation that invites that kind of negativity.
Right. Similar concerns to Clownfish about fan reaction, but maybe with more anger directed at the studio.
Definitely a more accusatory tone.
Yeah.
And the concern wasn't just about Snape either. I went broader.
Yeah, Kaida expressed worry that this sets a precedent. Fear that the main trio, Harry, Ron, Hermione, might also be race-swapped later for, quote, political reasons.
And worried about the kids who might be cast in those roles.
Exactly. Worried about the harassment those young actors could face. It taps into this bigger frustration they express.
Frustration with.
Just the whole trend, really, this feeling of fatigue with established characters being changed across different franchises.
Like, it undermines the original stories they love.
Yeah, and caters to an agenda they don't agree with. There's a real sense of weariness in their commentary about this pattern. Interesting. Did they address the common counter-argument you often hear in these debates?
You mean the "it's fictional, it doesn't matter" line?
Exactly that one.
Yes, they tackled it directly. Kaida argued that, well, fiction does matter. Storytelling is fundamental, and changing beloved stories does negatively affect people's connection.
So rejecting the idea that changes are consequence-free just because it's make-believe.
Pretty much. And they ended with a kind of call to action.
Which was?
Urging viewers to support original content, creators making new things, and also to gatekeep existing franchises.
Gate meaning actively resist changes they don't like.
That seems to be the message. Protect the stories they cherish from alterations they see as damaging.
Okay, wow. So two very detailed, very strong sets of reactions there. If we try to kind of boil it down, what are the key points where Clownfish TV and Kaida seem to overlap, even if their tone differs?
Well, the most obvious one is the starting point. Both strongly disapprove of casting a black actor as Snape because it contradicts the book's description.
Right, that faithfulness argument, the character being described as pale, that's central to both.
Definitely. And both sources raise significant concerns about Snape's backstory, specifically how placing a black actor into that narrative of being bullied, poor, ostracized.
And particularly that hanging.
Yeah, particularly that scene. How that might create uncomfortable or problematic racial undertone, even unintentionally.
Yeah, that anxiety about how those established plot points might resonate differently seems shared. What else?
Both also kind of touch on the approach to representation. They seem to feel this specific choice, changing Snape, is maybe less effective or, as Clownfish put it, lazy compared to other options.
Like creating new diverse characters, as Kaida suggested, or maybe expanding existing ones, the alteration versus creation idea again.
Exactly. And then, sadly, there's the shared concern about the actor.
Papa Esidu himself.
Yeah. Both voice worries about the negative, potentially hateful backlash he might face from certain segments of the fan.
Which is just a really grim aspect of these situations, highlighting the real-world impact on the individuals involved.
Absolutely. It brings that human element right to the forefront.
Okay. So we've unpacked quite a bit there from both Clownfish TV and Kaida. Now, just to circle back and be crystal clear, as we wrap up this deep dive,
we need to stress we are not endorsing any of these opinions we've discussed.
Not at all. Our goal here was simply to explore and analyze the viewpoints presented in their commentary, to understand the arguments being made in these particular online discussions.
Exactly. To give you, the listener, a clearer picture of the different perspectives out there without us taking a side.
Right. So thinking about the intensity of these reactions we've looked at, what does this whole situation tell us? I mean, about the connection people have with fictional worlds.
It's fascinating, isn't it? That relationship between audiences, beloved stories, established characters, and then these complex, ongoing conversations about representation on screen.
It really makes you think, how do creators navigate that? Balancing faithfulness, which clearly matters deeply to many fans, with the push for more inclusivity.
And what are the consequences of those choices? For the stories, for the actors, for the fans themselves? It seems like there are rarely easy answers.
No, definitely not. It really underscores, I think, just how powerful stories are, how deeply people connect with characters. And it raises those big questions about adaptation, identity, fiction, and how we talk about representation.
It certainly does.
Oh.
Definitely gives us all something to chew on long after this conversation ends.